It's a common misconception that one can tell the difference between the beers of an ale and a lager simply by the look. That's not true, and that's what I'm here to talk to you guys about, the difference between lager and ale beers. Beer itself has been around for a long, long time, thousands and thousands of years. It goes back to ancient China. It goes back, you can find it in the history of the Mayans, you can find it in the history of the Greeks. In fact, the oldest known recipe for beer is an ale beer. And beers have been around for so long. Ale is the oldest one because, well, they had the tools necessary to make an ale beer. In fact, the oldest known recipe was for an ale beer. And you might ask why. Well, with time, everything changed, technology improves, so with technology came lager beer, and I'll explain why on that later. But with ale beers, the way they're fermented is the process. Fermentation is the process in which yeast converts to glucose. The wort in the wort is the big drum thing, and I'll show you right here. This is my equation. Sugar plus yeast equals fermentation, all right? And here is the big worts that the companies use, like big, large companies like Coors and Heineken and everything. They use those. Other people have the homebrew kits, and they'll have like a little 5-gallon drum or something. But so that's where they do the fermentation process, and that's what I wanted to explain, the difference between the lager and the ale fermentation. And so some may wonder, I'm sure you guys have a basic concept of beer, right? Lagers and ales. It's like red wine and white wine. They're the big category, and there's multiple subcategories in beers. And they'll say, how come if you can't tell the difference between a blonde if a blonde is always in a lager and an ale isn't always a dark beer, why is that? It's because of the hops that they use. And here is a picture of hops, right there. See that kind of hop? They have all sorts of different kinds of hops. They have either like the light blondish kind of hops, and that'll make your light beers. And they have these dark green hops that'll make your dark beers. And so I'd like to talk to you guys about the fermentation process for the ale beer. For ale beer, the fermentation process is fairly simple. This is why they were able to ferment so long ago and make the ale beer so long ago. It needs heat. Fermentation process for ale beers need heat about 140 to 160 degrees, which we were able to produce since man made fire. So that's why it's been around for so long. Oh yeah, and also with the fermentation process, the hops, they all float at the top. So there's heat, they float, and not only that, it ferments within a couple days. I don't know why it ferments in a couple days, but it does. Probably because the heat, helps develop growth. A whole bunch of other things. So that would explain why ale is the first known recipe for beer, why it's been around for so long, and why you find it in every culture from thousands of years back. So next, I'd like to talk about lager beers. The reason lager beers are relatively new to the scene. They started making a big uprise around the 20s. The reason why is because technology. With time comes new inventions, and the invention of the refrigeration, being able to cool climates. And that's what lager beers need to ferment. They need cool, nice environments, about 30 to 40 degrees, and that's necessary. You can't make a lager without it. So with the hops, as opposed to the ales where it's hot, the lagers are cool. And not only that, the ales, their hops float at the top, and that's where they ferment. The lagers, they ferment at the bottom. And so some of you might not know exactly what a lager is, but you see them all the time. Stella, Coors, Budweiser, all those. As opposed to ales, Newcastles, and all those other beers that you guys probably don't like. So with the refrigeration device and it being able to be cool, that's why ales are so new, because lagers are so new, and that's why they're on the uprise. The taste is pretty plain. It's pretty unanimous, pretty generic. It's not hard to buy into it, and it's easily accessible now. And so, this is a picture of what ale beers look like when they ferment. You see how all the yeast, everything's on the top? It looks kind of gross, but when it's bottled, it doesn't look that bad. And this is a picture of a lager. You see how the top is nice and clean, and everything is at the bottom because it's a nice, cool environment. So it all just sinks down to the bottom and it ferments. And lagers also take much, much longer to ferment. They take like 2 weeks to a month. So ales are a lot simpler to make, and they look grosser. So that's not to say that one can taste the difference between the two beers. You can. The way I like to look at it is the way you can look at an ale beer is the way you can look at a jungle. Jungles are diverse, they're wild, you find a lot of life, and things move fast, right? Everywhere you go, you see different funguses, everything. That's kind of like the ale beer. The ale beers, the environment's hot, so it's diverse, it's exotic. The taste is different. They blend them with different things, and things move fast, just like ales ferment very fast, 2 to 4 days. And the way you could look at the lagers, you can look at the lagers like a cold winter environment. The way you know, like the way you look at the wild, everything up in like Alaska, everything moves slow, everything has time, everything has patience over it. It's basic, and that's what a lager's like. A lager, the taste is very basic. Everything it's a slower process, but it gets it done. You taste the hops, you taste the wheat, you taste the little things, but it's not quite as wild as an ale is. So that's why you have extremes of ales. You have the ones that are really nutty and fruity, or the ones that are just real stout. Benjamin Franklin said that beer is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. How is that not happiness? That right there to me is happiness. So, with that being said, you guys all now have a new appreciation of what goes into making a lager and an ale beer. Now, go out and pursue that happiness. Just don't pursue it too much. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, Valerie, what did you think?
I thought it was really interesting, and the topic was good. I liked how he talked about the history, so that we know like a better understanding of what he's talking about. He had really good visuals, like the pictures were big, and he explained thoroughly like what they were about. I also like the use of his metaphors, and it just like how he explained it was smooth. I felt like maybe he should put in a compare contrast slide to show like better like when you described which one was the different brands and how the ale maybe and the lager or whatever. And yeah, I thought that was pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, maybe a compare-contrast slide, especially both on the fermentation process and on the temperature and on maybe some of the brands that are being talked about. I did like the metaphor also about the way that they develop. I thought that did a nice job kind of explaining to people and giving us a sense of the difference between the two. What's that?
I was drinking when I thought of that. I was looking for some inspiration.
Yeah, there you go. And the opening was fine. There are a couple of things that I think are a little bit problematic. First, I thought that it was not, I didn't really get a very clear preview of what the speech was going to be about. Now, as I was listening to it, on the first point, it felt like you were going all over the place, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is his speech, and it's all, and there's no transitions, and he's rushing through this. And then you got